Okay, I'm Jay from TechForce. Thank you everyone for being here. So I'll tell you a small story, right? This group of robbers in Milan, Italy, what they were doing is they had been tracking the Instagram pages of the celebrities, and they were gathering information from the posts the celebrities have posted. So the information like the entry and exit points to their apartments and the floor they were living in, they were getting so much information. And also from the tags and the geolocation, they were gathering when this celebrity is going to be in the flat or out of the flat. And, with the raw information they have correlating with the events that are happening, so they have intelligence to use it for their benefit. And what were they doing? Because they were robbers, right? And more advanced at that technologically. And they were climbing the apartments from outside and they were ransacking these celebrity homes while they were away. So that's why they are called acrobat thieves, right? So where did they get the information from? Open source, public domain. It's right there. On the business front, right? Pre-COVID times, before COVID, it's almost like saying before Christ, after Christ. It's been a million years, right? Before COVID, I was invited to chat with a company in Aberdeen about their security. So before I go to the meeting, like any salesperson would do, I did a quick check to see who I'm meeting with, what they do, what they have done in the past. And to my surprise, this person I was meeting with, he listed every single technology they were using in the company in his LinkedIn description. And in the job role, he listed how they were using this technology. So now I know their entire technology stack, and I could be using, if I'm a bad actor, I could be using for my own benefit. I could be, exploiting the known vulnerabilities in this technology stack, or I could be sending phishing emails. I could be monitoring their social media and, correlate events with the information I already have. I could be doing lots of damage, right? So this information, unfortunately, is available for bad actors and at the same time available to us on the good side. And how can we use the information? How can we protect our companies? And that's exactly why we are here. I have my co-speaker, the main speaker, Javvad Malik, who is not here yet. He will be sharing some advice. But saying that, if you have any questions during the webinar, please do post them in the question and answer section. I have created a poll. Please do take part in the poll. And an apology from Lisa Forte. She couldn't make it due to last minute changes. We may have a surprise speaker who is willing to share her thoughts on this. So actually, Javad's saying his Zoom link is not working.
Yes, we've resent him the link.
He may be in the attendees, so I could have a look and promote him as a speaker, but he's not there yet. Okay, well, just not these two incidents I have shared just now. If you look back in 2015, United States intelligence service, they have used a ISIS fighter's social media post to track where he was, and they bombed their HQ, right? So we can use it for really good purposes. And there are a number of tools to help us with that. I'm sure Have I Been Pawned, URL Scan, Shodan. I've recently come across something, intelx.io. You put in your email address and it gives you, all the data breaches you're part of. And right there, you can see your passwords or password hashes. It's crazy. It's how easy it is now. A script kiddie just go on and get this information and use it against us, right? So what's the solution? I think the awareness levels for our employees, our colleagues across the business to defend our organizations, plus defend themselves, improve their security in their personal lives as well. So that's exactly why we're here. And Javad's here. So let me Sorry for this hiccup. Finally, he's here. Javvad is a security awareness advocate at KnowBe4, one of the biggest security awareness training company in the world. And he has been in this security for the last 20 years. He's passionate about all things security. And he's a fellow CISSP as well. He's a YouTuber, blogger, podcaster. Please do find him on YouTube. He makes really good, funny videos as well. So without a further ado, I will give it to Javvad. Javvad, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for the hiccup.
Yeah, no, sorry, there were some technical issues, but we got through it. I don't think anyone noticed that there were any issues, so that's all good to
Cool. Know. Awesome. Over to you, sir.
Okay, excellent. Let me just get this. Okay, so in a true tried and tested manner, I will say, I hope you can see my screen, and any nodding will, okay, that's confirmed. So Jay already done a far better introduction to me than I'm comfortable doing, but that's me, and I work at KnowBe4, as he said, world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform, and yeah, I think we're awesome. So we're here to talk about OSINT today and what you can use it for to help strengthen the security for your organization, how bad guys are using it to attack your organization. So OSINT is it's an acronym because we love acronyms in the security industry, as anyone that studied the CISSP will tell you. It's full of acronyms, but it stands for open source intelligence. And what that basically means, it's just data that is collected from publicly available information and publicly available sources, and then they're used in a manner to launch an attack or gather information about you. And with these days, everyone is online. Everyone has some form of digital footprint. Every organization has a digital footprint. And that can be used. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we use it, OSINT, into some degree or another all the time. So if any of you have ever moved house recently, then you would have used that. You probably go on Google Maps, you're looking at what the neighborhood's like, you're seeing, well, this house is over here, there's the rat run here. You go on other sites, you'll see what the school ratings are like, what Ofsted is saying. You go on something like Nextdoor, and you'll see what the neighbors are saying. You do all these sorts of things, and these are just publicly available sources that you can sit at home and you can just go through it, and you can say, okay, this is what the crime stats are like, this is what this, and that can help inform your decision as to whether you would like to move there or not. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like anything, it's a tool that you can use in good or bad ways. What criminals are getting very, very good at is weaponizing this OSINT and using it as a way to craft very, very targeted phishing attacks against your organization. So phishing are those like emails that you get that are not really from who they claim they're from. So personal emails, you might get stuff from Netflix or Amazon saying, hey, your account's been disabled, click here and re-enter your credit card details or bank details to continue your service. So those are more general phishing emails. Spear phishing emails and whaling, I'm going to bundle them together in a way, is something that's fed by OSINT. So what people will do, they'll gather information about you. They'll find out who you are, and they will craft a phishing email that's very, very specific to you, which has got a far greater likelihood of being opened. So
Javvad, quick question. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Are you happy to share the slides with the attendees afterwards?
Yes, absolutely. I'll make the slides available. So
the recording as well?
Read them at your own leisure. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. Cool. That answers the many questions we're getting.
Yep, cool. So yeah, spear phishing is ones which are very highly targeted towards your organization. Whaling is like a kind of spear phishing where they go after the big fish, the whales, and those are the execs in your organization. So, if you can figure out what your exec likes, dislikes, family, all that kind of stuff. You can use it to launch something that's very convincing. The consequences are many. I suppose the three broad categories are financial fraud, some sort of malware, or account compromise. And through this, you've probably seen through the news over the months and years that this can result in money directly being lost, or you being held to ransom, and that's all bad publicity, as well as the financial loss and the recovery costs. And then the more sly ones are the account compromise, where someone will compromise an account or an email box, and then they'll use that to monitor, gain information, or use that as a stepping stone onto bigger and badder things. So now that we've got some kind of context around it, we're going to go through what are the typical steps of OSINT at a very high level. And this can, like many things, the deeper you go into the weeds, the more there is to uncover. So we're going to keep it quite high level. We're going to go through the three main phases of OSINT and how that is used, or how you can use it even within your organization. You can follow these steps, you can gather some information, and then you can use them to craft some tailored attacks against some of your colleagues and friends and family, and get struck off everyone's Christmas list. But you'll see how effective these techniques are. So let's start with step one is reconnaissance. And as the name suggests, it's basically you're trying to fill out the broad information that whatever you can get. So, you're doing basic searches, and obviously you can use search engines for this. Google has some very sophisticated search queries that you can import, so you can search for specific names on specific platforms. So if you do a search for happy birthday for the person's name in Facebook or Twitter, you can start getting results of like, oh, everyone's wishing this person's happy birthday, or this handle happy birthday on this specific day. There's a high likelihood that's their birthday. So then that's one bit of information you've gathered. From there, you can find out friends, family. If you go onto Twitter and you see who someone follows, the first person or the first few people they follow are normally their close friends and family, and they've been following them for the longest period of time. So this is all information we'll start to gather, and all of this, even if it's like, information that you might not think is useful, it will all come in handy at a later stage. Basically, if you want to visualize it, this is kind of like how it, you start mind mapping it out. If you have someone's email address, you typically end up knowing what their first or surname is, or getting a good idea. If it's a corporate email account, then you know what company they work for. Maybe there's some accounts associated with those, or documents associated with that. From there, once you have someone's full name, you can work out what their social media accounts are. From there, you can work out their work history, what groups they're part of. So LinkedIn is great for this. So you can go on LinkedIn, you can see what someone's work history is, and you can see the groups they've liked. So if someone is like, part of an entrepreneurs group, and they're part of Toastmasters, and they're this, you think, well, okay, this person, they want to do these things, and they like public speaking. So I can maybe, you start thinking, maybe I can tailor a fish around, hey, we are a speakers bureau. We want to invite you to speak to young and upcoming entrepreneurs. So, it just, everything starts falling into place. You have physical address that you can get from it. And this grows onto, all these other kind of documents, and you can expand onto families and friends. What bad guys will also do is they will look through breach data. So wherever an organization has been breached in the past, there are normally dumps available of what the email addresses and passwords were for all the people that were on the account. So they'll go through that breach data, and they'll see what other information they can gather. So whether that be passwords, which is a common one. So if you had an account at, kittenfood.com, and kittenfood.com got breached, and you were using the same ID and password on that as you were everywhere else, then guess what the first thing they're going to do? They're going to try that email and ID combination on every other site they can think of. So they'll say, well, maybe with this email and this password, they used it on PayPal or eBay or Amazon or, any of the other sites that you might have, maybe your work accounts. So that's where that, or there could be other information that you've given to that organization. So they might know what your address is, how many pets you have, what food they like, what allergies they have, all that kind of thing. And all of this information is very, very useful. And from that, you can also find, all this extra information. And like I've said, it's, there's other things that are really, really interesting. I mean, if you find out how many family members someone has, or their favorite pizza topping, or their browsing habits, all these kinds of things, it seems insignificant, but it actually, in your mind, it starts piecing together a very interesting picture of who the person is. They're a vegetarian, they have a large family, they live in this part of the world, they do this. You start to build a character up very, very quickly. And it's amazing, like, you don't even need automated tools for this. Just in your mind, you're fleshing out a character. It's far better. It's far more. It's almost as interesting as reading a Stephen King novel when you start going through that character development process and you get to know them. It's just like that. So once we've gathered all the information, now it's the time to sit down and plan it out. And there aren't really many steps involved in the planning. This is something that you depending on the information you've gathered and depending on your target or targets, you will do it. But one of the best things to do is to organize the data that you've gathered into groups. So, as an example, I'd use buckets like this. So all the personal information, put it into one bucket: relationships, education, services, property, social media. So what it does is it helps you just figure out at broad levels what all the bits of information is. And then you start thinking, okay, given everything you know about this person, the age group, the gender, the work experience, the ambitions that you have, all those kinds of things, what could I do that would emotionally provoke them? And that's what a good criminal or a fisher would do. They're looking for ways that they can provoke you into clicking that link or downloading that file or answering that text message or giving up some information. That's ultimately what the goal is. If they can get you to do it, and they'll create that sense of urgency or fear, reward, concern. And I mean, this is something that we do on a OSINTers do on a manual basis. But if you think back to Cambridge Analytica scandal and what happened with Facebook, this is pretty much what they were doing. They were doing these, they were collecting data points on individuals, and they were figuring out, okay, if this person has these likes and dislikes and preferences, or this is their personality type, then this kind of advert will force them to take this kind of action. And it was highly, highly effective. So once we've planned all of that, the next phase is naturally we just go into attack mode. So we craft a phishing email that we will send to the target, and see how it reacts. Now, there's some do's and don'ts. Do stagger the timings of the attack. Don't do it all in one go. But there are a lot more don'ts when we are doing it from an ethical perspective. There are lots of lines that we don't want to cross, and this isn't an exhaustive list. And I think this is where it becomes quite. There's lots of debates that go on, like what should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed in these scenarios. But just bear in mind that you're there to try and replicate a targeted attack, but not necessarily to emotionally harm or cause other distress to the person. But criminals don't have that filter. They will go after, your family or your loved ones or what have you. There's the NSO group, I believe they offer this sort of spying malware as a service kind of thing. And apparently one of the government officials, they were able to get their malware on their phone was by sending them a text message. This was in South America, Brazil, possibly. They sent them a text message saying, your child has been involved in a crash. Here's a link to the location of the hospital that they're being treated at. And that's probably the most devastating news anyone can receive. So you're not going to sit there and look at that. Well, is it really from the hospital or the authorities or not? So that official clicked on the link, and that was enough to install the malware on their phone. So this kind of thing that, when we talk about emotional hooks that people will go for. So now that we've gone through this, I thought it'd be really useful to bring it to life with an example. So I asked some of our researchers to share an example with me of that I can share with you of an attack that they've conducted. So everything's redacted here, so this doesn't relate to a real person, but let's just call the person John Smith, and this is based in the US. And so what was the first phase? First phase was reconnaissance. So they went out and they done some searches, and you can see it was very, very easy for them to just go out and figure out what their age was, where they lived, associated people, phone numbers, address, everything. And actually what they said was within 60 minutes, within 1 hour, this was all the information they were able to collect on that John Smith. So you can see it's pretty much everything, even the vehicle type, make and model, their religion, their political affiliations, all these things. And so, even if you're not trained or you're not an expert and you don't have all the automated tools, within a couple of hours, even half of this kind of information will allow you enough to launch something that is very, very effective. So based on all this information, they arranged it, they planned it out, and they sent a couple of different phishing emails. So one of them was this. They realized that the person had been interested in trying to value their property. So they sent this email claiming to be from a realtor, saying, hey, I got this offer, emailed. I don't think it's going to meet your needs, but, I'm sending it over. Let me know. I think we can get closer to the price if we have a little bit of patience. And this looks really, really, it's actually very clever because it's from, the person is actually valuing their house. They're looking to sell it. It's from something that they know. So you can see like it is the person who they've dealt with in the past. It's their real name. It's got the actual address on there. It's none of this like high potential customer. It's actually his name there. And they actually pulled the signature from the website. So that's the legit logo, signature, everything. And then these are some of the red flags to look out for. Like, the domain was similar to the real one. It wasn't the actual real domain. There were some spelling mistakes in there. Secondly, like, is it normal to expect this kind of email on your work email account? Most likely not. And then there's this is what in marketing terms, what they call the call to action. It's a request to click on this. So take a look and let me know. And this is actually quite really well crafted because a lot of times criminals will try to instill a sense of urgency. So sometimes they'll say, hey, click on this and let me know by the end of the day. But this one, they left it a bit more open-ended just to not apply the pressure, just to not raise any red flags. So this was the one they sent you. The other one was a bit more closer to home in that they, well, I don't use Facebook anymore, so I don't know if this still happens, but if you get an email on Facebook and it's, you have the notifications enabled, it'll send you an email saying you have a new message and it'll give you like a little snippet of the message. And this is apparently from Facebook, and it's from his daughter, Sam Smith, saying, hey, I got this message from someone claiming it to be from you. Is this you? And, there's the tagging on Facebook link. There's the view on Facebook link there. There's the unsubscribe link there. So there's lots of malicious links embedded within it. But yeah, so the real daughter's name was used. Her real photo was pulled from social media. Their real Gmail account was referenced. We know that they're not a Yahoo or a Hotmail user. We know that they're a Gmail user. And so, like, it's the email address was spoofed. There's something there that's quite enticing. It's shocking to get them to open the link. But and then there's the embedded link. So you can see how this is a really powerful way where you can use OSINT to craft something that, I mean, otherwise from a generic template, you'd never be able to get this level of accuracy or specificity. You know what I mean. And then there's this one, MyFitnessPal. We know that he's a MyFitnessPal user. There's some security alerts. There's, something's going on with your account. So yeah, we know that they use FitnessPal, they address him by his name, reference a breach, and they have some locations that are near them. So it's again, it's a spoofed email, some worrying there, and then there's a link that takes you somewhere else. Finally, there's the Department of Transport saying you ran a red light, and they use their actual vehicle. They use their vehicle information, and everything's there basically, as so nothing looks untoward from the perspective of the victim. And those are some of the red flags. So the question is, like, if you got an email like this that's highly targeted based on, like, say it's using your real name, it's from a service that you use, it's linking to stuff that you have talked about in the past or something you are expecting, the question is, how would you fare, or how would your organization or your employees fare? And I don't have the stats here on the slide with me, but you can imagine it's very, very high. If I know you're a Netflix user and I send you a specifically Netflix related phishing email, that's going to be more likely to be clicked on than if you're not a Netflix user and I send you something just generically. So this is where, like, that targeted OSINT research really, really comes in handy. And the thing is that there are so many tools out there now that the bad guys use. They can automate that process, they can harvest a lot of data, and they can create those dossiers on their potential victims and targets. So it's something that we need to be aware of. Now that we've gone through that, I suppose the next question, natural one, is what can we do to mitigate these? And I'd say, like, 3 steps that you should bear in mind is provide security awareness and training to everyone. If you use a product like KnowBe4's, you can personalize the templates to make it more specific to your organization and employees. You can also run something like email exposure check. Again, it's in you can check on the website. It's so you can see where they have emails that have been involved in breaches, and target some of your most highest risk users. So if someone works in finance or they have access to accounts and what have you, do that. And then we also offer a bunch of best practices for how to run a simulation and how to do training, because again, it's quite easy to get carried away sometimes with a phishing exercise and do something that is successful from a phish perspective, but it can be hurtful to your employees, and you don't want to ruin those relationships. This is very much an educational piece. It's not meant to be a aha, I caught you piece. From an individual's perspective, just be mindful of the information you share, not just on your own social media, but also for friends and family. I think this is very much a societal thing, a community thing. There's no point in me being very careful online if my wife's going to post photos of kids going to school on outside our first day back to school, and they're in their uniform, it's displaying their school name, it's got a house number on, it kind of like defeats the purpose. So it needs to be something that goes beyond you. Don't use your company emails for personal signups. So many times we've seen, like, there's been breaches in the past, and some embarrassing breaches like dating sites or illicit encounter sites, where people have used their government even email addresses or their work email addresses. It's just something you really need to avoid. Check out the privacy settings and increase it. And finally, if you're not already doing it, just do some OSINT yourself against your company. Look at, there's lots of tools on GitHub that are available. There's YouTube videos. There's companies that can come and do some assessments for you as well. But just check it out and see where your exposure is. I guarantee you'll be surprised as to how much more information is available than you actually think it is. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Jay, for waiting for me. Even though I'll blame technology still, I maintain my innocence. And thank you everyone for your time. And yeah, the slides will be available afterwards.
Brilliant. Such a great talk, Javvad. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll take some questions later on after we have another, as I said, a surprising speaker who would like to share her thoughts as well. But before that, I didn't realize I didn't make the poll live, but I did now. But it worked out to be perfect timing as well. Please do take part and take part in the poll. And Javvad, see the Facebook, the email you used, the photo, Samantha Smith. That girl is a popular actress back home.
Okay.
she's actually called Samantha. she just married recently, so she changed the surname, but she's a real person. She's a very, very popular actress. Right. So all the information was redacted before it was sent to me, so I assume they changed it. So I didn't realize there's a pop culture reference I missed there. I must be getting old. Just I thought it's a funny fact. Right. Okay. I will ask Holly Grace Williams to share her thoughts. Let me promote Holly to be a panelist. Holly, are you here?
Hi, yeah. I am indeed. Hello.
Hi. We have Holly here. Holly works for Sekarva and she has a startup as well. Holly is fantastic at what she does. And I will let her do the introduction and share some thoughts on the topic we're discussing here. Please do ask questions. I don't see many questions. Please keep them coming. In comments or question and answer section, please do ask questions. Thank you.
Let's see if I can do a technology and successfully share a screen. There we go. That should be working. Yeah? Okay, I got some notes. Okay, so this isn't a well put together presentation that I prepared weeks in advance at all. We were speaking this morning and the question was like, hey, do you want to talk about OSINT and that kind of thing for about 5 minutes? So I'm going to speak for about 5 minutes on some OSINT stuff, but maybe giving a different perspective to what Javvad has with his much better, well put together presentation. So I'll, in 30 seconds, introduce myself. My name's Holly Grace Williams, and I work for 2 companies. I'm the managing director of Security.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you have another mic you can use?
Oh, is this not good?
It's okay, but it's not very clear.
Is it too quiet or is it too...
Oh, it's good now. Yeah,
there we go. Microphone position. Okay, so I work for 2 companies. I'm the managing director of Sakama. Sakama are a penetration testing company. I'm also the founder of Akimbo. Akimbo writes software that breaks computers. And the reason I wanted to kind of interject a different perspective is what I do is the breaking side of things for the most part. I describe myself as breaking department, not fixing department. And that gives us a little bit of a different perspective. So the thing that I wanted to talk about in the kind of couple of minutes that I've got is when organizations think of the attack surface and they think of protecting against things like phishing attacks where open source intelligence is used as an aspect to that breach, they sometimes draw the attack surface differently to how the threat actors might. So just in case you haven't heard the term attack surface before, if you think of all of the things that a hacker could penetrate as part of a targeted attack against your organization, that is probably the attack surface, everything that we can touch. And there's a couple of places that I think this thought process of trying to map your own attack surface, the attacker might get a different answer to what the defending team might. attacker, hacker, threat actor, whatever term you prefer as your preferred term for cyber criminals. So one of the ways that this is often different, where people think of OSINT in somewhat of a limited way, is people very often think of open source intelligence gathering in the context of phishing attacks. And as Javvad has shown, it is very, very powerful in that context. But another context that we frequently use it is physical access testing. So I mentioned a second ago that I break into computers and buildings for a living. And physical access assessments are a big part of that. Very often organizations put a significant effort and make real leaps and bounds in protecting the perimeter of their organization, protecting their endpoints, things like that, but not necessarily their physical locations, exposed network ports, those kinds of things. And this is something that came up a couple of years ago for me when performing a physical access assessment. We used open source intelligence gathering as a significant part of an intention to compromise a facility physically. So that is using open source intelligence gathering to learn about an organization, but not to learn just about their staff and the systems that they use, the technologies that they have, but things like the physical layouts of buildings, the positions of CCTV cameras, what kinds of access control do they use, those kinds of things. And I haven't managed to grab the photograph from the report that I did for that, but one of the things we found through Instagram, through using location searching, was staff members taking selfies at work. And I think for any organization of any scale in this year, that's probably a fairly common thing. I definitely take selfies at work. And in the background of those selfies, we found things like the layouts of CCTV. But most importantly for that engagement, what we found was the type of access card that they're using. So when it comes to protecting physical locations, most organizations use a ID card to gain access to control access to doors, those kinds of things. And not every kind of RFID card has the same level of security. Some of them are very difficult to abuse. By abusing in this context, I mean cloning them, brute forcing them, those kinds of things. And some are very easy. And in this particular instance, there was a common issue that I regularly come across that it seems in my experience people haven't heard before. Some RFID cards have their access code written on them, which is wonderful if you then find a high quality selfie on Instagram of the access card telling you what kind they're using, and also the access card's ID card, so you can make your own at a distance and come to that building, come to that office space prepared with an access card that you've just made. So there's a lot of different kinds of RFID, and I'm not going to have time in my 5 minutes to give you an introduction as to how those work. But you can see here is an example of an RFID card. And this particular kind of RFID card has effectively an 8-digit access code, although the access code is actually separated into two parts. It's 3 digits and 5 digits. The 3 digits come first, and those are the facility ID. So those would be shared across all access cards. And then the second group, the 5 digits, is that actual access card's ID number. And for many of these systems, that isn't actually 5 digits up to 99999. It's stored in binary, and it tops out at 65,000. So when it comes to open source intelligence, don't just think phishing. Javvad did a really, really good job of demonstrating that is a legitimate risk, but it can be broader than that. It can be things like physical access, things like people sharing photographs of ID cards, that disclosing not only what the ID cards look like, but the type, technology, and even in this instance, the access code that was used. When it comes to RFID cards, if you're not aware, by the way, cloning them is actually really, really easy in some instances. Depends on the technology that's used. But for this particular type, you can get a little RFID cloner that has a battery in it. This cost about £10 off eBay, but they're available on common websites, eBay, Amazon, those kinds of things. Get close enough to an RFID card and you can clone one, or you can use more advanced technology that would allow you to spoof them. You can also brute force some RFID cards. So if you can go prepared knowing what kind of RFID technology they're using, you're better prepared to arrive on site and do awful things to their access control systems. So the first thing is, OSINT is broader than just phishing, and it can be physical access testing. Another thing, just for the last slide here, is consider OSINT from not just that person's professional life, but we all have lives outside of work, and sometimes there's risks there that don't really get tested or can't really be tested in the same way, but might give risk to an organization. For example, it's not uncommon for people to share passwords between home and work, not only between work systems. It's not uncommon for people to use personal devices, whether you allow them to in policy or not. It's very often that I find organizations that have a BYOD policy that effectively prevents the use of personal devices, and then we find staff are using them anyway, or they're doing things like sending emails from their work email address to their personal email address to get it off the work device onto their personal device. I found a brilliant example of that with a government worker who had sent some documents to their personal device by sending it to their personal email address so that they could work on them on their own device. And then when they'd worked on them, they sent them back to their government address. That was actually disclosed in a Freedom of Information Act request. And if you've never worked with Freedom of Information Act requests, before the information is released, very often they are redacted. And that particular government workers, in fact, all of the people involved in the email chains, work email address and contact details had been redacted, but not that person's personal address, because the person who redacted that document went through and basically looked for everything that ends in .gov and cleaned that out. So that was a disclosure of that person's personal email address, which I could then target for things like phishing, which could then allow me to gain access to documents that we know they have shared between work and personal that I shouldn't have access to. Or maybe it could allow me access to shared network resources. Shared network resources on this slide, what I'm talking about here is everybody's working from home at the moment, and we're using home Wi-Fi and things like that. So maybe I can't compromise their work device, but I can compromise their home device through a phishing attack, something like that. And then I'm on the same network as them. And as a hacker, as an ethical hacker, that's one step forward. Still a lot of work to go, but it's a big leap that can be beneficial. So don't just think of OSINT in terms of, phishing. It's broader than that. And don't just think of OSINT in terms of a person's professional existence. Think of it in terms of their personal existence as well. And my last slide before I stop talking is, when it comes to security testing, pay an awful lot of attention to what is winning in the context of penetration testing, which is where this slide talks about. Very often, companies don't consider us to have won the penetration test, to have been successful, unless we compromise a highly privileged account, like a domain admin account or something like that. But very often we don't need to do that. We don't need to gain access to a significantly privileged account. If we can gain access to a member of finance or something like that, they might have restricted permissions, but still have access to sensitive data. So maybe we'll compromise someone else who has, a privilege creep. They've been with the organization for a long time. They've got more privileges than we think they do, or maybe they just have access to one key system. It's another thing to consider. And tying that back into OSINT and things like phishing, be very careful if you're doing things like phishing training, so trying to phish your own staff members to see who is susceptible, as to how you gather those metrics. So that's both in terms of, are you gathering just who's clicking a link, or who's submitting credentials, or who is falling for more significant attacks, such as downloading software, accessing malicious websites, those kinds of things. And also be careful around the metrics in terms of, if you try a very simple to guess phishing campaign and then a more complex phishing campaign, you will see a difference in how many users fall for that. But that might not be representative of your security risk. That might not be that you've just done security awareness training and suddenly everything's gone better. It might be that those campaigns were a different difficulty level. So yeah, to very quickly summarize my rant, OSINT is awesome from the threat actor's point of view, from the cyber criminal's point of view, and it can be used for a whole range of attacks, aside from just phishing, but also things like breaking into buildings. And that's me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Foley. That's fantastic. And thanks for stepping in at the last minute as well. Right. Just before we go into the question and answers, TechForce, who we are a cybersecurity services company, helping businesses to improve your cybersecurity posture. So whether that is security awareness training, what we're talking about here, or cyber essentials, security monitoring and testing, please do get in touch, right? So moving forward, also we do have a couple more events tomorrow, accelerating incident response and vulnerability response, as well as cyber quiz, a fun quiz in the evening tomorrow night. So please do sign up. I'll follow up with the links. Right, questions. Holly, one of the popular questions I will ask you, what are some of the tools you recommend for doing OSINT?
It's really funny because when somebody asks me any OSINT tools that I recommend, the most success I've had recently is Instagram. Instagram allows you to do location searches by default. There's no fancy tool required for that. We mentioned earlier doing searches on sites like Twitter for certain dates and certain events and things like that. There are tools out there that can make gathering and sorting that information easier. But most of the time when we're doing actual engagements, we're being very targeted in nature. So I don't actually use any tools. I just use the interfaces of social media directly. If I'm doing something really fancy, I might use the API. But yeah, my most successful tool recently has just been Instagram search box.
Brilliant. Javvad, any further comments?
Not really. No, I think Holly's covered that. It's a lot of it is just about being specific. I find like just like good search queries on Google or whatever is sometimes enough to get you started, and then once you're in the platform, you can like Holly said, like Instagram's got some great search capabilities. So something like Twitter, it's like very, very powerful. So thing is like it's with this information, a lot of times you're not specifically, well, sometimes you are after specific information, but a lot of times you're trying to build a picture in your mind of what this person is like and how you can like take advantage of their weaknesses. So think of it less as like I'm going to get a list of all the IP addresses in their home, and more about like, well, what are the chances I could actually compromise their home network in a more holistic sense.
Brilliant. Hey, please keep questions coming. We have 8 more questions here. Javvad, another question for you. What's the difference between social engineering and OSINT?
So OSINT is the act where you're gathering the information on an individual. Social engineering is the actual point where you're interacting with an individual and trying to scam them and fool them. So that could be in person even, or on an email, phone call, text message. So that interaction is more like where social engineering is, and the actual act of gathering the information on the individual to do that is OSINT.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, Javvad, since you spoke about a lot, phishing attacks. How common is the domain name spoofing in terms of phishing attacks? So Ben's asking this question.
So domain names get spoofed an awful lot, especially for like popular brands and what have you. There's kits available out there that you can just use, and it's out there. But it just depends. The thing is that for a lot of people, even if it's just like a slightly misspelt domain, or you replace an O with a 0 or something, it's like people won't notice. So which is where it's really handy. Especially in the organization where they turn on the banner where it says like this email originates externally. That is something like that is really useful, because it avoids having to rely only on the person to look at who's it from, and it's a good visual cue as to say, well, okay, this is external of your email, even though it might appear to be internally.
One of the things on that, Javvad, that we've had really good success with recently is not misspelling domains. I think a lot of people are aware of that. It definitely does work, but it's not the only option. Something that we've done is effectively like company name system alerts or company name IT services or something like that. So it just sounds legitimate. The system alert one's my favorite because I want people to read that message and think, oh, this is auto-generated. There's no scammer here. This is the computer talking to me, because sometimes they'll have a lower paranoia with that. So yeah, it's spoof domains, misspelled domains, but also just crafted ones.
Mm-hmm. What can businesses do to prevent their domain being spoofed? Ollie?
I was trying to avoid that one. Can I fall back on breaking department, not fixing department? The truth is, it's really difficult, and security awareness training in general is really difficult. We have best practice that changes over time, where you put an awful lot of effort into teaching staff members one thing, and then the practice changes and we have to teach them something else. Passwords are a good example of that. I think the trick is, you'll probably get the most benefit from what Javvad gave us a second ago, which is marking emails as external. Because if the domain is misspelled, or if the domain is expanded in that way that we've just discussed, the user would at least be notified of that. And if an email says, hey, this is external, and it doesn't look external to them, you should teach them that that would be suspicious. Another thing to do is, of course, within security awareness training, teach users what they are supposed to do. I see an awful lot of security awareness training that says, don't click links in emails, but then doesn't tell them what they should do. What is the positive action that they should take? So an example of that could be, if you get an email that says, oh, your Facebook account has been locked, one of the safe things that you can do is open a web browser and type facebook.com. And that way, you don't have to worry about, is this link malicious? Is this domain misspelt? Something like that. You took a positive action to avoid that risk. If your Facebook account is having a problem, it'll tell you on the interface. And if it's not, then you know the email was illegitimate. So yeah, when it comes to security awareness training, make sure that you tell users what they should do, not just what they shouldn't do. Yeah, no,
I'd echo that. That's such a vital point, and it's often missed out. And even if the fallback is report or forward this to your security team, and they can then advise you. And this is where I think it's also really important. If your security team needs to have that good relation with people, they shouldn't roll their eyes. They shouldn't say, "Oh, that's the 7th time someone emailed me that." It's their job as educators, as supporters of the business, to actually be there for them, because it might be very, very sort of like trivial to us, but for people receiving this isn't their day-to-day job, and they've come for help. So it's important to build that relationship.
Yeah, and also I would add, whatever the email system they're using, you could enable anti-spoofing so that they're not receiving emails from their own domain externally, right? And I've been personally a victim of that a decade ago. So, all right. How do you get the balance right? We have a question from Yusuf here, between making the tech easy to use versus secure.
I have a really good example of that, if I could jump in. So one of the things I mentioned a second ago, that best practice changes, and one of the things that I frequently see within security policies is organizations falling back on password length and complexity. So they'll say something like, you must have a 8-character password and it must have complexity, where complexity is up as low as numbers or symbols, typically 3 of the 4. That would be Microsoft systems that require 3 of the 4. That isn't good for security, because password 1 with a capital P would match that complexity and length requirement. If you make it longer, I'm just going to do password 1, 2, 3, and get around it in that way. And also the best practice, so relying on the NCSC's guidance and something like, say, NIST's guidance with NIST 863. Both of those guidance organizations say you should not enforce complexity, and you should not rely on that as a protection mechanism. And this is a really good example of getting that balance right between usability and security. So what the NCSC is recommending at the moment is you should teach users to pick 3 random words. Random is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence. Don't go 1, 2, 3 or cat, dog, bat. 3 random words. And on the Akimbo website recently, I posted a blog post, sorry to plug that, but I was just doing work in this area. And what I was looking at was the worst case scenario from a user's point of view. How would those 3 random word passwords hold up? So if a threat actor got access to the worst password hash, be that MD5 or NTLM or something like that, and did a brute force attack on the most powerful hardware available to them at that time. And my opinion of the findings from that data is those passwords are secure. For most organizations, they will give you a good level of security. And remembering 3 random words is much easier than remembering 16 completely random uppercase, lowercase symbol passwords. So there's actions like that you can take to get that balance between security and usability.
Yeah, and also we could use the password managers as well. Javvad, would you recommend shock tactics to motivate the board of execs to take security more seriously if they are reluctant to spend money on training for staff? The question coming from Alistair, so such as phishing them and sending them to link, encouraging them to take training a bit more seriously. So the question is, would you encourage shock tactics?
I wouldn't really encourage it. I think what the problem is, like shock tactics, they work maybe in a very limited way. But the problem is when you shock someone like that, you often anger them. They feel like they've been tricked or they've been duped, and you end up getting more angry with them or not. I think that the key is to build good relations with your execs. And this is something that as security industry, we've been talking about for a number of years now. How do you talk to the board? How do you get budget? And how do you do this, that, the other? It's not an easy thing, I think, for especially when it depends on the size of the organization. Larger organizations are far more challenging in a way. But, you know, you need to build the relationships, and you need to understand what the business drivers are, and then position security from a business benefit perspective. Like one thing that, you know, is always good to ask security professionals is, like, if, say, like you're in a public company, have you read what the shareholders report is? Do you follow what promises the CEO has or the board has made to the shareholders, and what direction the organization is going in? So if they're prioritizing X, Y, and Z, and you go to them with a plan that prioritizes A, B, C, you're not going to get very far. So you need to find a way of aligning your security awareness or your security program strategy to the business needs, so that you're helping them. And this is what we really mean by being an enabler. You can shock someone, and even if they agree, they'll begrudgingly give you that money. And then you've got a target on you where they'll be like, I gave you that money, you said it's going to deliver this much return. And then you're going to be under a lot more pressure for the next budget cycle.
Brilliant. Awesome. I know we are running out of time slightly, but last question, very last question, Holly. What's a good way to check out the bit.ly link safely?
This is a tough question, actually, because not only is there, you know, bit.ly links, but there's other URL shortening services, and some things like social media, for example, will enforce shortening. So I noticed on LinkedIn this week, for example, if you post a link, they will shorten that link, which makes that more difficult. I don't think for the common user there is an easy way, because I don't believe that for any links, teaching a user to hover over the link and then parse the URL is ever going to be effective, because URLs get crazy sometimes. And if you look at some of them, like product links from Amazon and things like that, they get long and have strange characters in them, and analytics tracking and things like that. So I would say that those links, getting a user to be wary of them is probably not going to help, and you should look at other protections like web filtering proxies and perimeter-based antivirus and those kinds of things. Yes, if you're like looking into these things and you're a techie, then you could do something like spin up a virtual machine and click the link in the virtual machine and monitor it, but that's not going to work for your average user opening your average email. So where possible, build systems so that the users don't have to click that link, that they can access that content through some other medium. Or shout back to what Javvad said earlier, which was teach your users, if they are unsure, to ask the security team or ask the IT team, and get somebody who is techie enough to do that, to validate it for them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for both of you for making it. And also we have 10 more questions which we can't answer just now, but we will follow up with the answers from Holly and Javvad. And to everyone else, thank you very much. Please do sign up for our 2 more events tomorrow, especially the quiz. It will be fun. We have some great questions. And hey, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.